Our next card is Treachery, coming in at 11. It has an average rank of 11.62, and we all have this pretty close together, with Patience at 10, I have it at 11, and then BlackShadow at 14.
Yeah, super power play. Super duper power play. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a straight upgrade. There's no way about it. It's a one extra cost, but it is far. It's kind of funky as well, actually. To be fair, because it's obviously it is one extra cost. It's a question of whether you particularly get value out of that, because of course you can just play this like a typical power play. There's no reason you can't. You know, for the double bump. It's all about the unload feature for unloading for a couple of troops that go directly into combat. It's all, I think this is the real crux of the card as to whether you get real great use out of this, or it's just like a slightly more expensive power play and you get to like commit into a combat you wouldn't otherwise. And it comes down heavily to what you do in regards to that. It's I think it's a card that is very dependent on timing. Not just the timing of when you pull it, but the timing of when you decide to play it and how you decide to play it, and what you ultimately do with it as well, of course. But it's a card that obviously is very strong, even if you just use it standalone. You just get it and you use it and throw some troops in. Like, it can't be bad for that. But it is all about the unload feature.
Yeah, I think of Treachery as like a 2, potentially at its best, a 2 to 3 point card, because maybe you're going to win an early combat with it, because revealing it or unloading it for 2 extra troops in the early game, if you're able to buy it in around 2 or 3, that can win you one of the stage 2 conflicts for a point. Then it's obviously a point when you play it on whatever intrigue track. And then if you use it to steal an alliance or to take an alliance, it's another point. So I just, whatever, like, those things are all variable, but that's kind of why I rank it so highly.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this is one of those cards that has a lot of play to it. I like saying that, but it's a card that works well with existing synergies. It works well with the new synergies. It's just all around something you want to do. You want to win combats. You want to go up tracks. It's just a better upgraded version of power play, and you will always want to take this. There's been a couple situations where I've had a Treachery and a power play in the row and only been able to buy for 5, and that does feel a little bit weird. You're like taking its, like smaller brother or something like that, or sister. But a very, very powerful card. One of the best unload cards. I honestly think that this is probably the second best unload card in the game for sure. I have it.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, it has the potential to be the best. Because the 2 troops, again, like, getting troops can be very challenging, especially when everyone's trying to get them from the shipping track, or like Conspire, or just Hardy Warriors. And so getting 2 troops for free that can kind of come out of nowhere, people will probably see it coming eventually, but it's reusable. It makes you want to cycle through your deck and do things you want to do anyway, like draw cards, like you like to do, BlackShadow. I can't say no to that, really.
The question is when do you play this like as its own action instead of like unloading it? That's the real question with this, and I guess where it comes down to timing, and how you decide to use it, which sometimes is tricky because you feel like compelled. Obviously, if you're going to try and steal an alliance, you'll want to do that, but then getting the troops in the combat might not be very useful. You might also be the other situation where this is a way for you to go like Hardy Warriors and throw a ton of troops into combat to take it away from someone.
Yeah.
But the double bump there doesn't really do anything for you. It might like get you your water back, and that's about that sort of thing. So it's a little. I think this card can be a little difficult to kind of use all of its great powers and strengths in one motion. You tend to kind of like do it for one, and the other one's kind of like a side bonus. I think that's the only thing I would say against Treachery.
Isn't that great though? Like, if you reveal it or unload it twice and then play it the third time you get it in your hand, then you've got 6 troops out of it. Like, that's awesome.
Which is huge, especially nowadays. That is definitely huge, but it's picking up early, which can be tricky. It's 6 persuasion. It's pricey, and you're not always gonna be able to buy it, and it's definitely a target for like a Helena example to pull to the side to pick up for 5. 5's a lot easier to get than 6. It's a bit of a hump to get over sometimes.
Yeah, totally. Shifting Allegiances is our next number 10. We're in the top 10. And similarly, like to all these cards, like, I'm always judging them by how many points they're going to generate right up here at the top. And Shifting Allegiances is really the big difference with it over these other several of these other at least point generating cards. Treachery, for example, is it's a 3-cost card, right?
Yeah.
So it's easy to pick it up in the early row. It gets snapped up by the first player that can grab it usually, and it, for 2 spice, you're going down 1 in 1 row or the same row and up 2. And that's just absolutely huge in a game where you're racing for the tracks, racing for the alliances, or trying to overtake people with 2-point bump. Like, man, this card, you build games around this card.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super strong. I mean, I can't even begin to count the amount of times where this card has turned up in Imperium Row, and then suddenly people start picking Ikaz and Helena. Like, it literally, people will pick them to try to get hold of this immediately. And that's probably fair. Like, I'm not saying that shouldn't be the case, but like, this is a card that even warps who you might pick, because you think, oh, Signet Ring, and just take it, and no one else can get it. It's like guaranteed for you. So that definitely does happen. There's a lot of questions I have been asked over the course about how best to use this card. Because I knew that there are some people who do struggle to kind of feel like they're using it correctly. Even though you think it's just 2 spice for a net bump wherever you want, which is, it's not a bad payoff. You could argue that it's like it's not cheap. 2 spice is not like you got to find that spice from somewhere, and if you're not doing a lot of shipping, like, that can be hard to muster sometimes. So I'm kind of curious to know how people tend to use this. Like, I tend to find a really effective way to use this is to just basically, if you can get this early, is just absolutely bomb one influence track and just keep going there. And then get yourself so far ahead that people don't really want to chase you. And then you start shifting off the persuasion from that faction and feed it to other factions, rather than kind of spreading it around. It's not always possible to do that. Like, sometimes it's difficult. Obviously, like, if you're going Bene Gesserit, for example, that's a lot of spice you've got to find. But I think it works quite well with, say, like the Fremen, for example. The Fremen is your fighting spaces, getting the water. You can keep going steel suits to pick up the water, so you can mine. So then you can then take the influence to go elsewhere. There's a lot of different ways to play this card, but that's one I think not a lot of people try, and I think should definitely be considered. Just completely just bomb for one alliance, be shipping, lots of how you do it, and then siphon your influence away from there to other factions, depending on how the game's going.
Yeah, for me, this is one of the best cards in the game. It was one of the best cards in the game in the base game. I think that this one's about where it probably went down a little bit. I have just cards that above it that I would take over it usually. Shifting Allegiances is one of those cards that I will almost always take. It's very cheap. It reveals for 2 persuasion for some reason. Like, it just does a lot of things. It basically translates into a couple of things. When you play it, you can pay 2 spice to just go up 1 track, basically once, because you're going down 1 and then up 2. So you can go down and up 2. That's great. But the real power of this card is in its ability to double up effects, like the alliance border effects, or whatever they're called, the bonus of each track.
Yes.
To double those up, because it has a green symbol and a yellow symbol, it can get you extra Solari. You can use it for Mentat to, it's one of the best things to use for Mentat, because you're like, I'll just go up some tracks and then draw another card and then take another turn. It just feels so good. Yeah. And its ability to sneak alliances away from people is so powerful. It's hard to really evaluate this card without seeing it in action, but if you've seen it in action, you've got by it. So
yeah, I played this card to win the game I was mentioning to you, where Lannister did those crazy things with the Sonic Snoopers tech. I remember I was playing Helena. I had shifting allegiances. I went interstellar shipping. I shipped. I used the 2 spice to use shifting allegiance to go down another track. I went up 3. I played the Emperor intrigue card for my 4th, and I just somebody was at 3 influence on the Emperor track, and I leapfrogged from 0 to 4 in 1 action with shifting allegiances yesterday.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah,
That's the kind of things you do with this card.
For example, is brutal.
Yeah.
Like really nasty, because obviously you compare it with the Sonic Snoopers. It's like not her Snooper token is really disgusting. I think the thing as well for shifting is it's probably one of the only maybe few cards in the game that just having it in your deck makes people play differently, in the respect that
Yeah.
they feel compelled, they have to shore up their alliances more, because they know that they can't just sit around and that you kind of hover nearby. They feel forced, like if they're on alliance, they've got to get themselves up to like 5 spaces on it and just do the extra work. So that's just the power of shifting allegiances. Like, it's so potentially just steal alliances from just completely nowhere, coupled up with like an intrigue maybe, or going to interstellar shipping, that sort of thing. Obviously is incredibly, like, it's a shock weapon. Shifting Allegiance is brutal.
That's a great point you make about it is one of these cards that warps the game, and it really warps a huge part of the game, which is the whole shipping track game. And what I really like about it is it gives you flexibility, because if you're going for an alliance with, and you have shifting legions in your hand and you get up to 3 and somebody really pours their effort into it and gets there first, goes up to 4 or 5 or whatever, you're like, chill, no problem, I'm going to go back down on that one, back down to 2, and I'm going to bounce up another one, you know, like I really like its dynamism.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, very hard to play against if people have got this. The fun is the occasion where both of these come into a game and they both get picked up and people just start shifting allegiances on each other. I have seen that once. It was carnage.
Yeah, it is wild. I've seen it too.
It is carnage.
Our next card is Gurney, Halleck, and I want to mention that 9, 10, and 11 are all tied at about an average rank of 11 to 67.
Yeah, I buy that. I'm
pretty
with that.
crazy. I mean, all these cards are very good, but we couldn't pick which one is best, I guess, of these. Gurney, Halleck at about 9, 10, or 11. And this card was one of the top 3, I'd say, maybe 4 in the base game. Extremely powerful card. It costs 6, right? Costs 6, right? Yeah, it costs 6.
Yep.
Gives you only access to a blue space, but its agent ability is 2 troops and a card, and it reveals for, what does it reveal for? It's 2 persuasion.
2 persuasion, and if you have 3 Solari, you can get 2 troops, and you can optionally deploy them as well, which is pretty significant.
That's right.
It's an insane reveal effect if you're running in cash. This in the hands of like Yuna is unbelievable. This in the hands of a Helena player is deadly, because you can just throw in troops whenever you want. And it comes with the card draw as well. It's just a nice little added bonus. Even if you just had the 2 troops, especially now that troops are harder to come by. Like I said earlier, Gurney he's the great finisher in combat. You know, just to come up sort of later on and just throw in absolutely gobs of troops out of nowhere. And he's very difficult to play against. And I think a lot of people underrate his reveal ability. And he's great. So even if you don't want to use him, like if you pick up other cards, you want to go Hardy Warriors, Highlanders, that sort of thing. Just using his reveal ability for like the last turn or 2 is totally fine as a way to kind of net yourself like a Spiceless Flow point and still be competitive in a battle with someone who's had to like really commit the whole turn to fighting. Gurney allows you the flexibility that you don't have to do it with him. But mid game with Gurney Halleck is a lot of fun. Yes. There's no debate about this.
Sayyadina?
I have a whole lot to say about Gurney.
I'm not a huge Gurney fan. But I have no argument with anything that was said. So I don't feel like I think all those things are true, and I just don't rank them quite as high as these other point generating cards.
Sure. Yeah, he's not a point generator. He does work only
via
on
combat.
you winning combats.
Yeah, he's a fighter definitely,
Yeah,
and he's not generally worth having if you're going to kind of put in the troops and kind of go for like little seconds. Like, he's not really a hybrid card sort of guy. He's the, you know, when he's you're going to war sort of thing. But he can double as one, potentially. If you just get a weird, funky hand, like, he can pivot into a Spice Buy if needed.
Totally.
But obviously, you're getting him for just the sheer firepower and just looking to just take combats away and just put board pressure on people. You know, he's kind of like what would happen if you took the Beast and put him into an Imperium Row card. It would be Gurney Halleck. It's exactly the same sort of deal. His presence just means that no combat is ever particularly safe unless you have to heavily commit. And then if you heavy commit, they just don't play it. So it puts a lot of pressure on people who feel they've got to get in troops a little early, because if you kind of wait for Gurney to happen first, it can be really difficult to catch up just because of the sheer amount of initial firepower he throws out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something
Totally.
to be said about his action compression because of how many things he gives you, and the blue spaces give you great things anyway. Either card draw, other troops, intrigue, or water. All of those things are great, and getting it in one action is pretty insane. Now, obviously, you're going to probably throw those troops into combat. They're probably going to die. Most of the time, they die. But one thing I want to say about this card, synergies, it has great synergies with negotiated withdrawal. Because you can 100% get 3 troops into combat with it.
Any city does it.
Well, yeah, except for
research station.
But
although research station, I would say, also has its own synergy as a way, again, like late game, if you decide just to pivot for Spiceman's Flow
and draw 4,
you can use Gurney Halleck to do that and still put some troops into combat and try and pick up like a 2nd or 3rd place.
Yeah. All right, back to next Sayyadina at 8. Sayyadina and Firm Grip actually tied at 8 at an average rank of 11.33. Let's start with Sayyadina. Who wants to go with this one?
Yeah, I'll go. I love Sayyadina. I think I ranked her. I think we all ranked her a little lower than this final ranking, but we were all right around sort of 10 to 12. It looks like.
Yeah. It's a top 10 confident. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I'm cool with it. Point generator, 1 trick. It's a simple trick, and it's a powerful trick. It's not that. I mean, it warps your game in the sense that you need to focus on water, and that's really the only downside to it. She's cheap, and points are powerful, and you can get 2, and if you get her really early, maybe even 3 points from Sayyadina in a game.
Yeah, for me.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, I'm sorry. So yeah, for me, the reason I have this just below Guild Bankers, I think they're very similar in how they play. They both kind of warp how you play a little bit. I think Sayyadina is just a little better because she's used to. You're probably going to use her once or twice as an action for access. That's totally fine. Her access to Fremen can get you water, which is what you need anyway. I'm sorry. Her agent action gives you the point, but you can send her to the to Still Suits and contribute to that point. So. That's an exceptional thing that she can do. She's the only card in the game that gets you a point on an agent action, if I remember correctly.
I don't think anyone else directly as such. Yeah, right. There's no one else in the game.
Which is amazing. And there's no other card in the game that turns water into points. They indirectly turn into points, obviously, if you go to Research Station or whatever. But no other card directly turns water into points.
I think the thing that's also highly overlooked with Sayyadina is because you're going to be probably using her to go to, say you've got 2 water and you use her to go Steel Suits, obviously get through and get the point. It also means that you are going to be competitive on the Fremen and Bene Gesserit tracks.
Yes.
Almost all the time, you are going to be pushing for those alliances. And even if you don't ultimately get one of them, or maybe if you ultimately don't get both of them, odds are that means someone else has had to visit them a ton in order to deny that for you. So even in that respect, you're putting indirect pressure on other people. And I think a lot of people do forget that, especially with this, like Sayyadina, more often than not, you're going to be... Because, again, even full influence for the Fremen is an extra water, which is great for Sayyadina. You need as much as you can get. Just use Sayyadina, rush Steel Suits, and just keep rushing, the seats, for example, and just get loads of water. Try and trim down your deck with visits. Use Sayyadina to go to, Selective Breeding. Get your victory point, trash out those not so good cards, and just try and maximize that. It makes total sense.
Yep. The one thing I will say about Sayyadina is that as we've said, these point cards can warp your game, which can be detrimental to being open and flexible with combat or with other forms of point generation. If you're using water for Sayyadina, you're not using it for tech, so you're going to have to get your tech in early. You're also going to have to be basically hostage the Great Flat style stuff, but for her the whole game. You're going to try to do that, or just hit up a Siege Tabor when you can. I mean, that's not always the best play, right? And that's the thing, is sometimes these cards like the Sayyadinas or the Guild Ambassadors or whatever, they tend to force you into plays that might not be optimal now for the promise of a point later, even though the point is obviously how you win the game. So it's it's a weird thing, and sometimes there's this push and pull that comes with these cards. They're like, okay, I don't really want to do this now because I have this other goal, but if I don't, I'm not going to be able to use her. And you really want to use her. That's why you bought her. So there's all those things to consider when taking Sayyadina. But I think if you see her in the Imperium Row early on,
take Ariana.
Take Ariana.
Yeah. I think there's a few things worth diving into this card. The Siege is interesting because I think the value of the Siege has definitely changed a bit. The Siege was very competitive in the base game because people tended to go Fremen early because obviously it was all about mining. And of course, Siege gives you water, which you wouldn't do for mining.
Yeah.
It's definitely not visited anywhere near as much as it used to now. People would much rather go Carthag for the intrigue, or you want to be drawing cards because you've got stuff with like unload and reveal effects, and you want to be getting hold of decent cards and that sort of thing. Someone having Sayyadina does kind of force people to kind of go to Siege to block you, which you feel compelled to do because obviously just being able to go and fight and pick up water and steal suits and just be able to print points obviously is incredibly dangerous. So it does mess with people in that way. It's also worth mentioning about the fact that this card also has a reveal effect of free persuasion if you can get the Throne Bond going, which is not difficult to achieve. And even if you don't have the water, if you can just load this up with, say, a couple of Arrakis liaisons, which remember, there's a lot of in the game, like you can probably even just use it to buy Spice Plus Flow as a backup if you just find you just draw awkwardly. Or say you go to like Steel Suit, for example, and you buy your water point, and then you refresh your deck and you pull Sayyadina immediately, and you can't like get that water together again. You can just pair up with liaisons, and you can probably get the Spiceless Flow as a backup.
Yeah,
I'm glad.
Even in that, there's like versatility.
I'm glad you made that point. I think that's really important about her because those draws often happen that way. And if that wasn't the case, if you couldn't get the 3 with the Fremen bond, the 3 persuasion with the Fremen bond, then you'd really be bending over backwards to make sure you drew it in a certain order and didn't get your discard shuffled in and all sorts of stuff. You know what I mean?
Which you can do a little bit, but you definitely can't do reliably.
No, but the fact that she gets you 3 off the Fremen bond if you build your deck right, because you build, again, most of these top cards, you're building your game around them to a certain degree, and this definitely is the case. And building a hand where you can get the Fremen bond is part of leveraging Sayyadina for, again, 2 to 3 points during the game, which is going to put you over the top in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Probably should make a mention, of course, of Sayyadina and Ariana. Feels like kind of wrong not to at least acknowledge this, of course.
Yeah, or Water Peddler. Gotta mention.
Or Water Peddler, of course.
Yeah, you know, like what stuff? I think it's Flo. Flo says, "You got to get the buddy." if Water Peddlers, you got to get the buddy.
yeah. This card gets powered up by Water Peddler, of course. If Chani comes up, that's nice. I mean, she's a Fremen, so it helps. There's a lot of cards that really work well with Sayyadina. It is kind of like the new linchpin Fremen bond card because you're going to want to go heavy on Fremen. Liet Kynes is insane with this card if you reveal. I mean, it's 5 persuasion for just 1 card to 7 for just them 2 together.
It's also a Bene Gesserit card, so that then leads into other cards you can play afterwards for their effects, like Embedded Agent or Other Memory.
Those are good points, man.
Exactly. There's so much you can do with Sayyadina. Occasionally you are going to get a rough draw of her, and there's just nothing you can really do. It will occasionally happen, but the positive far outweigh the negative.
Yeah, and nothing's sure. Nothing's a sure thing in this game.
I don't think I've had that experience or even seen it in a game where the Sayyadina was leveraged as part of a powerful Bene Gesserit deck, because that's really cool, actually. If you're generating points off the water agent action, and then playing a follow-up embedded agent, or
I once had the Sayyadina Mahayim game.
Wow.
It was kind of cruel.
Yeah,
because then not only you're taking all these cards away from people, and then they're just not able to block you from visiting Steel Suits in the Siege because their actions are just so heavily limited. They feel compressed to do only 1 or 2 things sometimes, and it just lets you have her on the board, and you just run away with the game. Like, it's incredibly rare to get it, but it is disgusting.
Yeah.
Firm grip.
All
it should be
right,
a cracker.
tied with Sayyadina is Firm Grip at the 7 and 8 position. So this one, yeah, we have a lot to say about this card. It's an oldie but goodie.
Yeah, it's very good. Please ignore my ranking of this card. Like I just ignore it. Forget it ever happened. This card should be ahead of Sayyadina. I don't think it should be ahead of the next card on our list. I will say that much, but I think this realistically is probably ahead of it. But I'll let someone else delve into it. But yeah, I'm sorry, everyone. Please forgive me.
It's okay. You got a small stroke. It's all right.
Well, what's interesting is even where you ranked it, it probably is in the right spot anyway.
Probably, yeah. Realistically, like I'm a complete outlier. Like I still think this is obviously a very, very good card, and does a lot for you. But it does have a couple of potential downsides. Is the why I ranked it a little bit lower. It's not as maybe potentially egregious as another card, which is a hill I will die on. This is not one I would choose. But like obviously this is an incredibly strong card, and it kind of like plays into itself is the idea. But I'll let you guys delve into it.
Well, I mean, for me, I put it the highest here at number 4. I keep talking about point generation. How many points? Like this point, every time you play this card on wealth, it generates you a point. Basically, you're going up on the Emperor track and on one of the other tracks for the cost of the space. So because it's an affordable card, 4 cost. Is it 4 or 3?
It's 4,
It's
right?
It's 4 cost,
Yeah.
which is
So it is something you can get within the first 2 turns reasonably. So you can no problem play this card 3, maybe even 4 times during the game. Like that's 4 points, like potentially 4 points worth of action. Like I just can't think of that's besides our top 3 cards. Like for me, it's so much action compression.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree. This card is basically a point every time you play it. It just costs you $2, 2 Solari. That's not hard to do. This card's value has gone up in my view with characters like Yuna, who can easily get more Solari and then use it for other areas, but if they really wanted to. Though if you're doing that, you're probably doing it wrong. You should probably always go to like Conspire or Wealth. The one thing I will say about this card is you never, or very, very rarely, will reveal it for the 4 Persuasion, even though you'll be going up the Emperor track. The biggest thing here is that it gets you in with the Spacing Guild by going to Wealth, which is insane. Like
if you haven't already got,
you haven't got there, and then you might as well have just gotten 2 extra actions for what you did. It's pretty insane. This card I feel was in the base game broken. Like it is a card that I've never lost when I had it.
This in base game was probably broken.
Yeah, I had this card. I've lost with it, but not by very much. It's a card that you want to keep a slim deck with, especially now when there's too many shiny things that you want to buy. We're talking about all these shiny cards that we want to put in your deck. You got to resist that. You want to draw Firm Grip every other turn or every turn. That's how you play it. This card gets better with characters like Paul, who can draw cards a lot. Ilban, this is great for Ilban.
Lido potentially as well.
Insane, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just think it's a known commodity. I think, or quantity and commodity, and yeah, I don't underestimate this card. This should be a high pick if it's in the row. You should never take something over this unless it is probably one of the next 3 or 4 cards that we're talking about here. But I think that this card honestly should be ranked higher than Sayyadina. I think it's that good.
Yeah.
Even though it's tied here at 7 or 8.
Yeah.
I think
it's probably the bridge between like the S cards and like the absolute elite tier. It's probably the bridge between the two. Probably this card. I think that's probably a fair thing to say.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
There is one point I say quickly here. I do want to just bring up, as it's a point that I'm not going to talk about now. It's going to come on a card that's coming up very shortly. But the concept of like the influence bumps being worth points. Obviously 2 bumps is a point. I think with Firm is probably the case because of course you get to choose where you're putting your bumps, so that is the power I think. if it just like say if it just did one like randomly and you rolled like a d4 or something and you it chose randomly for you, it'd be far more different than the fact that you get to pick. If that makes any sense. I know like rolling randomly is obviously sounds completely dumb, but it's a mentality that I'm gonna try and enforce for a conversation about 10 minutes.
Is that a card called loose grip?
I mean, it can be if you don't use it correctly. It can definitely
Lose your grip.
Things.
I think for me, there's a couple of things about firm grip that really put it over the top. Obviously, it's affordable at 4. It's the fact that the Emperor track is usually the least contested for the Alliance. Not always, but usually. So that means if you're getting to wealth, the odd time maybe to that other one that I can't even remember the name of that starts with a C. What's it called? Conspire, exactly. I so rarely go there.
The second time you've gotten that in this conversation.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's like a little shot at the Conspire fans. I apologize.
I cannot look at you the same way again.
Yeah, I apologize. But I think the fact that you're getting 2 bumps and one of them is in a track where you're have much easier time getting the Alliance to me is really huge. And then the other like thing that has already been mentioned is once you get that Alliance, if you get it, then in the final round, if you have more important things to do than use firm grip, then it's part of, if you have the Alliance, then it's part of an easy spice must flow. It's the only card worth 4 persuasion. Well, you have to have the Alliance, obviously.
Yes.
The one thing I will say that can be a little tricky with firm grip is that if people are pretty savvy, especially if there's a Una in the game or an Ilban, maybe even a Leto, they're more likely to go to wealth, and so you have to have some spice in reserve in order to get to Conspire. So you just have to be aware of the things that can block you, and I think this is the case for all these cards. You have to be aware of what can go wrong so that you can play around it. That's how you get better at this game, obviously, and I've been, having a bunch of bad games lately where I could have done better, but I stand firm that this is one of the best cards in the game.
This is something I did want to bring up briefly with this card. Like, what is the value of like going to wealth to block someone from using firm grip to go there? Like, do you think that's a valuable thing to do?
Yes.
Because wealth, obviously, like just going to wealth, it's not the best square in the game at all by any stretch of imagination. Like, it's nice, but obviously, like it doesn't feel great. I don't think typically.
No, you're right.
So it's something that I wanted to. I think was worth meriting some discussion.
The big thing is that there are no other money generating spaces for firm grip. It's only green and it's only Emperor, right? Doesn't go to desert. No, it doesn't go to desert.
No.
And so if it went to desert, I'd say it would be a terrible idea. But because there's no other way to make money, I think that it's a very valid way to block people, especially if they're sitting on no spice, so 0 to 3 spice.
Wealth is like it's the easy way to do it.
Yeah, it's the easy way to do it, and you're going to go there eventually anyway. I mean, you don't want to go there a lot, but 1 trip to wealth, maybe 2.
Give it a couple.
Yeah,
like, it's totally fine. Yeah,
that's
nothing
totally
wrong with that. Taking double bumps, firming up your Emperor alliance, which is always good for at least the point there, and obviously trying to push someone else elsewhere. It's a nice way of like if someone's trying to hold on, like to say the Guild Ambassador, for example, and trying to print victory points with that alliance. This can be a great way of like challenging that and kind of putting pressure on them.
Our next card coming in at number 6 is In the Shadows, and we have this one ranked very close together at 8 and 8 for Patience and Me, and BlackShadow has it at 7, and its average rank is 7.67, so it's a big jump here.
How on earth is this card worth 2 persuasion?
I don't know.
How? Like, I don't. This is probably the same as a liaison.
Yeah, it's really weird. I don't know what the deal is with this card, but In the Shadows has to be a mistake of the development process when you're like, okay, well, it doesn't have any persuasion, so therefore it's not worth 3 or 4. I'm sure they have some sort of algorithm for doing this, or maybe they're just feeling it out, but the fact that it costs 2, which is the same as the voice, which is the same as liaison. Now, obviously, now the theme of a lot of the Bene Gesserit cards is they are high effect cards that generally, run low in persuasion. Okay. This one, though, gives you an influence with Bene Gesserit for reveal, and you can unload it to do that, which is where it just goes completely bonkers. And when you're done with that, you can just play it when you have 2 influence with the Bene Gesserit. You can just go up with another track.
Do all sorts of actions as well.
This becomes a better firm grip once you've got 2 influence with the Bene Gesserit. I don't understand this card at all.
Yeah. And if you are lucky enough, you can then pair this up with cards of unload effects.
Yeah.
Is nuts. Let me remind everyone here. Other cards that are worth 2 persuasion in this game: Guild Administrator, okay, totally fine. Freighter Fleet, okay, sure. Arrakis Recruiter, Spice Hunter. What?
Well, we were talking about balance and that certain cards are intentionally imbalanced. This is definitely one of them. I've had so many situations come up when I played this game where I flip a card, I buy something, and then I don't have anything left over to buy an In the Shadows, which just comes up and the next person just takes it. The amount of tempo this card gives you is unbelievable. It's just unbelievable.
Maybe this is why we went selective breeding. All these games we've played, all the card trash we've done. Maybe this is the end product of all our selective breeding in the Shadows. We breed an absolute super card.
If you think of it from a designer's point of view, if the ultimate goal of a designer is not only to create a functional and tight game and all those other things, but is to create drama and stories and tension, then this card is perfect.
Oh yeah.
It flips on the row and everybody's like, it's just and then you play it as an unload and just for all its different purposes, and you steal alliances and you do all sorts of crazy stuff with it in combination with other cards. I have it a little lower. I still think some of these other point generating cards are better, but it's definitely in the top. I have it at number 8. It's definitely a top 10 card, and it's obviously super cheap. I think Web of Power has a slight edge on In the Shadows, which shows up in our average ranking.
Yeah, it's close, but it's I think that's a fair thing to say.
Now, I like this card. Don't get me wrong. I love playing it. When I get it, I feel woohoo! I get to do the things. I feel powerful, and no one else has this effect. Every other round, I'm going to be going up with the Bene Gesserit, and I don't have to go there. That feels great. I don't want to go there anyway, unless I have to. And it's one of those cards that creates... It doesn't even create that tension. This is one of my problems with it as a developing a card perspective, is that it doesn't create the tension that Ixian Engineer or Guild Ambassador does. It creates the kind of opposite tension that Choam Delegate does. It's I have to pick up this card. It's clearly the best card, and it's super easy to afford. I don't have to worry about it. It's just, I'm going to get it. Unless you have completely botched your reveal turn and you have 1 or 0 persuasion, you're going to be able to afford this card. It is very easy to do. So that's my problem with the card. But again, super fun to play. I love it when I get it. I hate it when other people get it. I hate it when people get other types of enablers for it, and the holo projectors, anything else that discards a card. God forbid this card gets discarded and then trashed in one turn, which I've seen happen with the Guild Administrator. What is it? The Chief Guild Administrator? Yeah. Oh my God. It's so annoying. And you're
Double
okay.
bump.
Yeah.
Going there. That's the great thing. In Shelves is a great way of sealing other factions, but in itself is its own great way of sealing its own faction as well.
Yeah.
Totally.
When it comes up,
now,
Oh, go ahead.
No, you finish that one.
The last thing I want to say is that when you're thinking about playing around this card, there are a couple of things that I want to say. So you can play around the card, but unfortunately, the only way to play around this card is to just don't go to Bene Gesserit. don't bank on winning that alliance. Okay, go to level 2 and just stop, because you're not going to outrace the person within the shadows unless you have one of the other very powerful cards that we were talk about here in a minute. But this card's effect on the game is a little bit I think Choam Delegate unfair, in that it gives whoever has it an immediate and it's not a paid advantage. It's just an advantage. There's no cost. I think this card would be fair if it was like you pay a spice to go up with the Bene Gesserit in a reveal. That would be fair. That makes sense. There's a trade-off there. It makes sense. But especially at a 2-cost card. But because it's just a reveal bump, that bothers me. But
especially
anyway.
if you just like extend this like Arakeen, like you're basically negating the discard in theory.
Exactly.
Like it doesn't even matter. So you just go Arakeen, you discard a bad card, you draw a better one, you get a bump, you send troops into combat. Like you're just doing so much.
And it enables other unload effects because you discard a card to go up, right? So it's just I don't know. Anyway, go ahead.
I may be missing something in game theory because I'm not like somebody who researches game theory and design theory. But for me, what I like about In the Shadows as part of this overall asymmetrical design of the card deck and the fact that the costs are in balance is that there's just enough. There's just like 10% of the cards which are valued way too low or which cost way too low compared to their impact. And that's part of what creates the craziness and the dynamism of the Imperium Row. And in the Shadows, what I meant earlier when I was talking about the tension it creates, there's 2 kinds of tension. The main tension is when this is on the row to start the game or flips early in the game, then the tension is somebody going to reveal on their first turn? Is somebody going to reveal before they take their second action to grab this? And the answer to the second question is almost always yes. Somebody will reveal.
It's very, or does someone just snag it with like Helena Recaz? That's the other thing. Especially if it's on the Imperial Row, like you will almost always see one of them there. They just want to pick their ring and just take it and just it's a done deal.
Yeah. So my last game that I got in the Shadows, there was like both Web of Power and In the Shadows were in the Imperium Row. And I was going first. So somebody picked Akaz, somebody picked Helena, and I ended up with whoever, Tessia, I can't remember, as going first. And I got lucky and drew 6 persuasion in my hand. And I revealed as the first action of the game and grabbed both those cards and had zero second thoughts about doing so.
Oh yeah. No doubt. I mean, that's what
and that's what I mean about stories. And that's what I mean about stories. Like this card generates drama and stories, and that's like a story that I'll always have about Dune Imperium.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think the only thing I can say that doesn't like put this in the absolute top tier is that it does require it takes a little bit of time to really get the big effort, and obviously that you have to get the 2 Bene Gesserit influence to actually start actioning its real big power. Now, obviously, you can just take that from just reveals, which is obviously what you're probably going to end up doing. But it does mean that means you're not revealing other cards that might let you buy other bits and pieces or have other effects. So there's like the slightest drawback there, I guess, if you want to be really nitpicky about it. It takes a little while to really unleash its powers, but it's never too long.
Yeah. Okay, we're moving on. Next is
Choam.
We have two tied here at 4 and 5. Web of Power and Choam Directorship. Let's start with Choam Directorship because I think that's going to have the most drama. Choam Directorship. Now, Patience. Yeah, we're going to be here a while. Choam is ranked at 1 by Patience. It is ranked 2 by me. And it is ranked 15 by BlackShadow.
15.
So I don't know what happened here.
So before I lose all credibility, because this is likely going to occur, I think no. So this is the card I said I'm willing to. It shouldn't be at 15. It should be a little bit higher, especially again. Like I had to rush to get some of these last ones. I'll probably switch it with Peter, for example, and switch them around. That puts it at like 10 or whatever. I think that's fine. I would not put this any higher than that, and I this is a hill I'm prepared to die on, and this requires a bit of a discussion and a bit of this requires some in-depth real talk here. So let's talk about the card first. There are not many cards in this game that when you buy them you get an instant effect. There's very few, and obviously out of the 4 or 5 cards that let you do that, this is obviously without question the most powerful. A bump in every single faction. This is obviously really good. And people will see this, and they'll see 4 influence bumps in 4 factions and think, this is really strong, I need to get this. I think this card can be a slight fallacy to itself in that just because you're getting 4 bumps in influence I don't think, and this is why I brought up this whole is is a bump half a victory point. I don't think this card is worth 2 victory points. I just don't. I think it's a bit of a fallacy that it's worth it, and this is what I'm going to talk about. So, first of all, this costs 8 persuasion, which is huge, very expensive. It's difficult to get. You're going to have to commit some of your turn to try and get hold of this card. Now, let's remember, of course, that for 1 more point of persuasion, you can buy Spice Plus Flow, which is a guaranteed point. Once you get it, it's done. It's in the bank. No one can ever take that away from you. This is why I think Choam Directorship is a little tricky. I don't think it's worth 2 victory points because you have to understand how the influence works and what you're getting it for. Now, in an ideal world, say turn 3 or turn 4, which is the only chance you're going to get to ever draw this card. You're never going to get it in your first turn. You're almost never, ever going to find a way to get it on your second turn. There's going to be basically turn 3, turn 4. If you haven't done very much faction access at all, and you've basically just gone to cities and such, and then you just you maybe went to still suits with a bad with your Sikh allies, and then you went to research station, and your Helena, and you do it with your signet ring, and you get Choam Directorship. Great, 4 bumps in alliances that you haven't achieved very much progress in. That's probably worth 2 points because you've not actually gained anything from them. I think where there's a bit of a fallacy here is that if you get this later in the game, looking like turn 5, turn 6, turn 7, the problem is at that point is that by then you've probably already put some effort into some factions. And there's going to be one that you're probably targeting, one that you're looking to defend, maybe one you're trying to steal, you're playing as a Tezzy or something like that. This is obviously very, very strong. How often in turn 6 are you going to take 4 influence bumps and all 4 of those influence bumps actually be useful? I think that's the question that I pose here, because typically there's one that's going to get you to an alliance, there's going to be 1, maybe 2 that get you the 2 influence to get that victory point, but I think it's very hard to have every single bump to be useful, because there's going to be one, like the Spacing Guild, for example. If you don't push the Spacing Guild because you're not shipping, someone is bound to have pushed it, and with Ambassador, whatever else, and ultimately that bump is kind of wasted to me, because you've got your 2 influence, you've gone instead of shipping, perhaps. That 3rd bump's doing you nothing. You're not going to spend a 4th influence bump on it to get hold of free Solari. You're almost never, ever going to do that. So I don't think this is quite worth 2 victory points in the actual sense. You have the additional issue with this card in what do you actually do once you get hold of it. If you do get it early, fantastic, you get all those influence bumps, but then what do? You can't use it. There's no agent actions. You can reveal it. Free Solari. It's okay, I guess. But what else is it doing other than that? And then typically this obviously becomes a candidate for trying to trash. And for some characters, this is easy. An ECAS can just reveal it and trash it by going to, board spaces and just trash it that way. That's fine. But other than that, you're kind of having to waste effort and actions, potentially, getting this back out of your deck because you've already bought it for its use. And that is stuff that you could use for other things. This is why I cannot rate this in, the absolute upper echelon of the card. I just don't think there's enough nuanced drawbacks when you really delve into it that I think just keep it out of the way. The instant impact is huge, obviously, and very strong, and people will go for it. But if you get to 8 persuasion, you'll not always, but there will be several occasions you're going to get to 9 anyways, because you've research stationed, or you've decided to go selective breeding, and you've drawn both your convincing arguments or convincing and a liaison, for example, and you get to 9 anyways, and you would have got the point regardless. So I think there's a slight thing that I think people miss about this card, and it's why I can't rate this super duper high.
Patience.
No, you go first, man. I'm waiting.
I'm
hoping that what I've said, you understand where I'm coming from here.
Yeah.
That it doesn't, it's not complete madness.
No, it's partial madness. I think what you're saying is true. There are situations where buying this card is not the best thing to do. It's usually in the mid to late game when alliances have been taken, and if you're kind of middling on the influence tracks, then buying this, if you're above rank 2 with every faction, then the value of this card goes down significantly. Unless you are about to steal an alliance or something like that.
Or your Tesia. I should note this
Tesia.
card. If you're Tesia, this is probably the best card in the game. Probably. It's definitely up there.
It might be good for Tesia.
I would say it's possibly better than some of the cards we've ranked higher than this. It's definitely up there. It's incredibly strong because always you're going to get those snooper bonuses. They're going to prepare you. You're going to be challenging potentially multiple alliances at the same time, and it makes people do all sorts of crazy shit. But outside of that, it's just, I think that's the issue. You get 4 bumps, but I don't think you actually get 4 bumps worth of benefit. And when, again, for 1 persuasion more, you get that victory point guaranteed anyways, and that's a line they can't take it. It's not an alliance that could get restolen from you. I think it has to be in the context. I've looked at that in a little bit.
Well, okay, hold on. So I wasn't quite done, but the
I know.
So you're almost saying that you can take influence away from other people, which isn't true, comparing it to points, because they are both they're sacrosanct in a sense, because you can only affect your own with specific cards. But I think yes, I agree that if you are above level 2 on every track and you buy this, you're not going to get anything from it. You'll get a bump on each track and no immediate benefit. However, those bumps are 4 extra actions you did not have to take in order to get up the track. And getting 4 extra actions is what you're actually paying for, even if you're not getting the 4 extra bonuses for those actions.
I was going to say, I don't know if I'd quote 4 extra. It's almost like 4 extra intrigues, and you know what those intrigues are going to be, one of each of them. Because obviously action, you're also still getting the actual space benefit. But it's a very minor point.
4 extra intrigues, how do you mean?
Well, all the intrigues that give you a faction bump.
Oh yeah, right. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Might be a slightly more accurate way of looking at it.
Yeah, but I mean, so yeah. That's the trade-off, right? Is like in those kinds of cards, you can hold them until the right moment, and then there's always that drama where, it's no longer useful, and people say, well, I might as well dump this now, and they just play it for fun. And you're like, ha ha ha, So you get those situations with this as well, but you also get those really high moments with those cards and this purchase, in that you'll have moments where you'll get 2 or 3 or even 4 points with one, fell swoop. You'll buy the Choam Directorship and you'll get the 4 points or whatever. If you're Tesia, you get the bonuses. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah. Tesia, this card is unbelievable. There's no question.
Right, and then you get extra bumps on 2 of them. I mean, that's the amount of work that you can put into doing what this card does for just for buying it, is quite high. So that's how I think of it. Like, the amount of work you would have to put into just getting what it gives you is very high. So that's what I have to say about it. And there's only one card I ranked higher than this, but I mean, I still think it is one of the best in the game. I would still buy it if it's like out in the row and I can afford it. There's no time I would not take it unless I'm late game and I wasn't going to have an immediate impact on alliances or bonuses or anything like that, or points. Then I would avoid it. And then there are the obvious problems with it coming back through your deck. It's worth, it gives you 3 Solari, big deal. I mean, that's usually kind of like it's almost like a drawback, because you're kind of like, okay, well, I have to reveal, so I'm not going to get to use the Solari this turn.
Yeah, but once you've bought it, it's doing nothing.
It's doing nothing.
That's my problem.
Yeah.
Unless you have like Dispatch and Envoy, and then you could potentially use this to send someone. So at least you're doing some of it. Like, fine, I guess, but
sure,
that is the issue. You if you get the card early, you feel like you've got to try and ditch it somewhere, because the free Solari it's not huge, and it's like you got cards that do so many more on like agent or reveal actions. I mean, nothing can do worse on agent actions than this card. So.
Sure. I think the Dispatch and Envoy, I mentioned this before, but the Dispatch and Envoy argument is, I want to kind of ignore that, because it makes
understand.
every single card better.
Yeah. I understand.
It's flat out makes every card better. And so I think that, it does. The cool thing, you can use it to trash itself with selective breeding. That's fun. I mean, like,
yeah, but I have done that once. That was pretty good.
So I agree that it can be a little bit problematic late game. It's not always the best time to buy Choam Directorship. 100% hear you there. But a lot of the other cards that I see also on your list rated higher have the same problem.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, almost any card has that problem. Like,
yeah,
there are very few cards you're going to buy in the late game. In fact, this card arguably has some
the
of the
best late
biggest
game. Yeah,
impact.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but the argument that BlackShadow made is valid, which is
Yes.
often if you can buy this, you can probably buy a Spice Must Flow, which in the very late game may be more important. Although you never know because you might be at one influence with a couple of on a couple of
Yeah,
tracks.
it's situational. You know, if you've got Holtzman engine, you might feel more tempted to go for the spice because obviously you want to get that plans within corner market. But obviously you've got plans within plans. This is the pick. It's dependent on kind of what you're trying to do, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I think early game this card does have the upside of being able to be revealed for the 3 slur, which can help you get your either your High Council or your or your Swordmaster
Whichever
faster.
one you didn't take, yeah.
Yeah, but I think the thing with Choam Directorship for me is that usually you're getting it in, the first 3, 4, in round 3 or 4. Sometimes a little later, but often it's been sitting there and nobody can afford it yet, and you organize your turn to get it. And what's really important to me is not only is that you accomplish moving up all those rows all at the same time, that can really help a lot of characters. It can put some already faction track oriented characters over the top, like Baron or Tessia or Leto. But what it really does for me is it frees you up often to then focus your other actions in the game less on the tracks and more on gearing up for combat.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the real power of Choam Directorship is that it frees up. I mean, sure, it can also just be contributing to like a 3 alliance game or something like that. But generally, what it does facilitates is okay, I'm going to have the points easy on each track. I'm going to get 1, maybe 2 alliances, probably 1 that's kind of average in a game, but that's going to be much easier. So therefore, I'm going to be able to focus on all the other things in order to build towards the end game and win the conflicts. And that's what I think is really super powered about Choam Directorship.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Should we move to our next tied fourth and fifth?
While I have
Yeah.
any shred of like people actually willing to listen to anything I say anymore.
No, that's not true. That's not true.
Oh no. It's a
Um,
valid argument. I think it's a big cost card, and what you've said is you've said some important things about it.
yeah, just be aware that when you're buying this card, you should buy it for a reason, not just because it's 8 cost. I think that's
don't just buy it because it's there. It needs to like kind of make sense. The other thing I think we're talking obviously like say if you're running in the shadows for example, not in the shadows, spy satellites I think should definitely be mentioned here as well. This kind of weirdly can synergize with this as like an unexpected pick, like later on, if you end up with high persuasion, and then this just kind of turns up because, of course, the people forget a lot with side sides. Obviously, you're getting the influence points with factions without ever going there. But of course, if you get to influence of all the factions, you can trash it for free spice. Which is obviously not, you're not getting spy satellites. You're not paying a total of 7 spice to trash it for a point. You should not be doing that. That is unbelievably expensive. But if the game kind of pivots weirdly, which sometimes it does, it can be a way of like putting kind of weird pressure on players to feel like they've got to stop you from going to certain spaces because they suddenly think, oh, they could just go to space and then trash it for 3 points, which has a psychological effect. You know, it's the same as basically like Guild Ambassador, and you can trash it whenever you want as long as you fulfill the conditions. So, Directorship can play very weirdly in line with spy satellites, even though the two on paper are like diametrically opposed.
yeah, I agree with that. I think that is one of the more interesting and also difficult choices I've run into is whether you commit to going up tracks or you abandon that and you buy spy satellites and try to play that faction starved game. I find both of it really interesting. I don't particularly like spy satellites as a tech, but that's just me. I think
Spy Satellites is one of those techs we could literally have its own discussion podcast.
Yeah,
Coming
we
to you
will.
soon.
But anyway, yeah, I agree. It does have some weird synergies that are not always easy to reconcile when you're playing the game. All right, Web of Power. So BlackShadow, you have this one at 4. This is your 4th best card. It is 7th best for Patience and Me. So
yeah, I mean, this is just like absurdly strong. You know, It's a fascinating card because it's one of the few cards in that why you have it and what you use it for changes throughout the game, which I think is fascinating. And I really love cards that do that. You don't just use them for the same reason all the time. You pick it up early to reveal early, to reveal early in the game, to get your influence dotted about with various factions, and then you start using it to cash in on those benefits.
Yeah.
And the benefits, if you can get those two influences, are significant. And also the fact of the extra bonus as well being that it infiltrates the Bene Gesserit, so it can't even be blocked. Makes this like just an absolute powerhouse. And only for 4 cost, which is pretty good deal, I think, all things considered. This is a fantastic way you can pick this up early somehow, to get ahead on its shipping super early. And people are obviously racing to get hold of that. This can get you the leg up and get you there before anyone else does. You can obviously again reveal it as well, just to kind of build up those points in factions you don't want to visit. Maybe you don't want to be going to the Emperor's spaces because it's not particularly valuable to you. You'd rather do other things. This can get those points for you, and then you just start playing it and you get the money anyways, which is just absolutely enormous. It's as we've discussed a few times. This is like the absolute epitome of action compression. Once you've got this fully up and ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, that's right. It's like a card draw, Solari, and what was it?
And water.
And water, yeah.
I mean, that's enormous. And that's not even counting what you're going to achieve with your Bene Gesserit visit. You're getting for your intrigue card, or whether you're going to selective breeding. I think that's the strength as well. The fact that that you can go selective breeding and not be blocked. Like, that's huge. It's a big problem when people are trying to get big cards. They'll visit selective breeding a lot, and there can be a race of who gets there first. So the fact that this will get you there, guaranteed, is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. No, I agree with everything that's been said, and I think that the clutch thing is what you guys were finishing up talking about there, was about the fact that it cannot be stopped, and selective breeding is so important in the late game. So just as you're getting everything, because I'm revealing this the first couple times usually,
everyone, yeah.
and then when it counts, when I need it to get all those bonuses, nobody can stop me. It's just like you said, it changes, it morphs into this power compression card. It's awesome.
Yeah. It's crazy good. It helps power itself up. It just gives you points every time you reveal it. It's half a point or thereabouts. Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that you don't even need every single other faction to influence. Even if you only have 2 of those, it's still doing tons for you. You're typically gonna have the 2 influence with the Spacing Guild. I think you're probably more likely to have the 2 influence with the Fremen than the Emperor. I guess it depends a bit. But this in the hands of a Baron, for example, is just completely absurd, because you're getting the Fremen, the Spacing Guild so early, because obviously his Master Stroke ability. There's just what things are bad about this card. I'm struggling to think of any. It only reveals for 1 persuasion. Who cares? You just use it with agent action. You go selective breeding, and you're probably drawing 3 cards. It's absolutely absurd.
Yep, it's a crazy powerful card. But what we're seeing here is there is a trend, and obviously an intentional one, where the Bene Gesserit cards are cheaper to buy but higher in value. The amount of compression that they can offer in actions is higher. Some of that action has to be kind of unlocked, but generally speaking, they tend to err on the cheaper side of cards, which is interesting. And I think that Web of Power as a infiltrate card is the best infiltrate card by a mile. And just for the fact that it if you compare it to the Choam Delegate, which is powerful because the space that it goes to is powerful, this one's powerful for that reason, because of selective breeding, but also because it gives you influence, also because it draws you cards, gets you water, and it just does everything. I'd even say that this card could be higher on my list. It's just below Opulence, which might be wrong, but I kind of value Opulence a little bit higher as a point generator, because you can always get the influence from Web of Power usually elsewhere, but you can't get points everywhere.
I'm I agree with that. I'm a little torn about that too, I must say, on Web of Power.
All right, our next one is Liet Kynes, coming in at an average rank of 3.67.
Yeah.
It
Taking
is.
the bronze spot.
That's right. It is going to be at my end, BlackShadow's 3 rank, and at Patience's 5. Why do you like this card so much, BlackShadow?
I remember when I first saw this card. Quick story here. The very first game of Dune I ever played. So this is going back, I think about 18 months now. The very, very first game I ever played, I got hold of 2 of the 3 following cards in this game. And this was on base. And I think it's one thing I'll just note on the side. I think it's fascinating that with all of the amazing Ix cards that have come out, the top 3 cards are all from base game.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of cool. Just gonna throw that one out there, and it's not even close. Like we've got a massive jump between Web of Power and this one, which shows you just how potentially game breaking these can be.
Yeah.
Anyways, I remember the one card I got hold of was Lazy Jessica, who I got hold of turn 2, and I was like, this is really nice. And then the next card I got hold of, courtesy of that, was Liet Kynes. And I remember seeing this card come out the Imperium Row and looking at it, I was like, how on earth is this a 5-coster? How is this not also 7? Because this card, like, it could just print Spice Must Flows almost for free. And is absolutely absurd. There is a couple of weaknesses to this card, which is why it's not any higher. But the fact that this reveals for 2 and reveals for an extra 2 for every Fremen card that you have in play, can be played agents, can be revealed, whatever you want, is just absurd.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's another word for it. I really don't know if there's any word for it. We've talked about it earlier. The fact you get an Emperor bump as well when you buy this is just like the icing on the cake here.
Yeah, right.
Given that it's a faction you don't particularly visit too much, and to be honest, if you're playing like a Fremen heavy deck, you're probably not wanting to really go Emperor. Maybe like once, maybe twice at most, but typically you don't want to go in anywhere near there. And ultimately the fact that that Fremen cards are just so easy to get hold of. Again, there's 9 of them at the start of the game minimum in the liaisons, and just obviously it's so easy just to take the Kynes, stack up on liaisons, get like 3 of them, and at some point you are going to get 2 Spice Must Flow in a turn. It's like it's not inevitable, but like it's just like you're gonna do it at some point. It's so absurdly good.
At one point, I had convinced myself that Liet Kynes was the best card in the game, and I was winning a lot of games with her. Like I would get Liet Kynes like round 1 or 2, and I'm like, "This is a game-changing card. This is a game where if you can see a path to victory, like unfurl before you, there is no more golden a road than it is than Liet Kynes and the buying of Fremen, because it will just reward you. You can do it quickly. It feeds into your already. You can do other things. You can send agents to do other things and not worry about it, because she basically buffers your persuasion. It's an unbelievable card. It anything that kind of multiplies the amount of something should be looked at very closely, right? It's almost a little bit too good. This is a 2 times, your Fremen cards in play. So the fact that this is so high shouldn't really surprise anybody. If you get this early, you're basically on the track to winning the game, unless something else weird happens. The only downside to this card, and it isn't really a downside because you can do stuff about it, is that you might buy too many points and you might end up with like 3 or 4.
Yeah, you can fall into a potential trap that you just buy almost nothing but liaisons, which will look good on the turn when you buy 2 Spice Plus Flows, maybe even 3, but outside of that, you're not doing a whole lot.
Yeah.
And that is a bit of a problem. You can completely annihilate your own deck synergy in order to do so.
Yes.
And that is something you do have to be slightly careful of. As cool as it will look when you get that double spice buy and you feel like, yeah, this is good times, you might overlook the fact that all the rest of your turn you don't have Liet Kynes. you're like scrambling for like mentat, trying to get something different, and just trying to have any kind of flexibility because you can't just keep fighting. You have to do more than that.
Exactly.
I think one thing that's worth noting with Liet Kynes is the fact that she does have Roman access, which shouldn't be ignored. Obviously, you shouldn't really ever be using her as an Asian action, really.
Maybe
But
like the
in
first
case
time you draw her, it's
yeah,
okay.
in case, yeah, if you draw just like a really bizarre hand that you draw Liet Kynes and like both daggers and a convincing argument and like a Dune or something, you can do that if you need to. It doesn't ever feel great, and it's very rare to see. But it is a backup option should it need to be there. But typically, you would just want to be just going sending cards to Arakeen, trying to go research station, whatever you need to do. Just draw cards, and just print Spicemas Flows and just try and win the game.
Yeah,
You know that's what she's good. It's her one massive trick, and she's pretty good at it.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of like lump this one in with Sayyadina a little bit. If you end up getting like both Liet Kynes and Sayyadina, I mentioned this earlier, but it's unbelievably powerful that both of them together are worth 7 persuasion. Just both of them. Like
I was gonna say obviously the thing is this card standalone is unbelievably great, but this also synergizes just hideous levels with cards like Saiyadina, Liet Kynes and Guild Bankers is just like potentially game breaking.
Yep.
There are stories of Liet Kynes, Guild Bankers, quadruple Spice Buys. It has happened. We have proof. We've seen it. It is absurd. But obviously these are going to be the exceptions to the rule. But yeah, with Liet Kynes, you can feel assured that pretty much you're going to get at least a point out of her, if not more. And just the threat that it puts on other players will start making them feel like they've got to start getting liaisons to deny you them and try and like get them out of the way.
Yeah.
And the liaisons might not particularly help them because it might not be what they want to do. And if they don't want to block you, then there's just a near infinite supply of Fremen cards for you to delve into.
Yeah.
Which of course is absurdly powerful.
Speaking of game warping effects.
Yes.
Well, did you have anything for Liet first?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you guys have been saying. I think that she's a game winner. She's a game winner. You build your game around her. The only downside to her, like any card, is just draw timing. Do you get her when you draw your liaisons or your other Fremen cards? Does the timing work out? But really, and also, can you fine tune your deck enough to really get maybe one? Like ideally, when you get Liet Kynes, you want to get one double Spice Must Flow plays. Or, alternatively, you just use her in a hybrid way, go more of a conflict-oriented, not totally conflict-oriented, but go for 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 victory points in the game through conflict, and use her to get 1 or 2 or 3 Spice Must Flows. That's the other way to do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's flexibility there.
A Fremen Bond strategy with the Fedekins. I'd say this is one of the cards that makes Fedekin Death Commando even really, really strong. Yeah, because it culls your deck, which you need in a Spice Must Flow strategy. It helps you kind of go half and half to win some combats, maybe get some early combat points. That's the best way to play Liet Kynes, I think, is get 1 or 2, maybe 2 would be ideal, but one combat point early really puts you on the track to win the game, because she's already going to give you half a point when you buy her. And that's just less work you have to do on the Emperor track. You don't have to worry about that. Just get like the 4 or the 5 points, plus the 1 is 6, and you just have to get a couple more points in Spice, and she can do that for you.
The only thing I would say against Lee is that she probably needs to turn up in probably the first 6 rounds to really be useful. Once you get into conflict freeze, I think typically if you haven't already seen her and then she does show up, she is of some limited use.
Well, the extra bump on the Emperor,
the extra bump on the Emperor it might be useful if you haven't already got it. And I have done that before. I've got her just for the bump because it gave me a victory point. So that can be of some use, but that's the only thing I would say is that if it's super late game she turns up, then that's just the way it goes. But you could say that about almost any card in the game, I guess. So it's
100%.
probably not particularly fair about that. One last thing I want to throw about Liet Kynes is the fact that she's only 5 persuasion does mean that you can get her in some very funky ways. Bypass protocol, spending the 2 spice, you can nab her. And also worth noting, which I have done before, is Boundless Ambitions,
Boundless Ambition.
unloadability. Yes, and I've done that before. I've hollow projected Boundless Ambition to snipe the Kinds off the Imperium Row. That was a good day. It was very good.
Nice.
The other thing we mentioned, vice versa when we were talking about guild bankers is the Leah Kynes guild bankers combo.
Yes.
Yes.
So that's, we've already talked about it when we talked about guild bangers, but it's like, talk about the buddy. Guild bangers is the Leah Kynes buddy. it's
hard to like really crazy pull off because you've got to have both and turn up and get hold of both. But if you can, it's there's some just make sure you just keep some water handy. Make sure you visit those still suits and the seats and just get that water ready because you're gonna need it.
Yeah, that is one thing I'll say about Liet is that as with most Spice Must Flow strategies, you are slightly more priced into playing with a Helena character who doesn't get blocked at Research Station, or to at least have like a bounty hunter for that, or some other maybe turn order in your favor to really take advantage of the turns when you're gonna get her. But I mean that's the way the game is, and every single round you're always fighting against turn order and like getting fighting for spots. So it's not really much of a warning to say that sometimes things don't always work out, but they don't sometimes.
I'm gonna say I'm fascinated. I was really interested when we put these together. Because I ended up picking like my top 4 as how it's actually come out here. But I honestly thought when I went and didn't pick this card at number 1, I was almost for sure assuming that both of you were gonna pick this, and neither of you did, which is fascinating.
No, I think Choam Directorship is a better card than Kwisatz Haderach, and I've had this argument with people for the base game, and I still think it's better. I think Kwisatz is very good. At our number 2 at an average rank of 3. The only problem I have with Kwisatz Haderach is that it doesn't give you an immediate benefit. It has to cycle through your deck. Usually that's not a big deal, but it means that it's only really useful in the first, like if you pick it up in the first 4 or 5 turns. 5 is really stretching it. Like you might get 1 use out of it. But once you do get it, however, that's when things start to really go to your direction. I love this card so much that the fact that it opens up different strategic deck building strategies, but also opens up different ways of playing the game. And what I mean by that is I've taken this card and then not ever bought my Swordmaster and just used Kwisatz as an extra, like
as a
Swordmaster.
surrogate. Yeah, that you do see this a lot. People if people can try and get this early, then they will like not bother the Swordmaster, not get involved in that race, and they'll probably get like say High Council.
Yeah, exactly. High Council. It's High Council and then hit Mentat over and over again. Yeah. That's what I do, and I think it's a really strong way to play, and it's a different way to play the game. It feels like you're shaping your strategy around these other things. You're investing your Solari into Mentats, which draw you cards, which draw you more Kwisatz, etc., etc. Like those things make a lot of sense, and there are some amazing plays you can make with Kwisatz that help you steal alliances, of course, because it's basically can go anywhere, almost anywhere. You have to
as long as you can get the influence / cost. Yep,
influence / cost, or it has not been voiced. We should point that out, right?
Yeah.
And in doing,
what are your favorite Kwisatz plays?
My favorite Kwisatz plays. So my favorite Kwisatz plays used to be just to double ship, but I mean that's fun. Lately I haven't gotten it in a while. Actually, I don't think I picked it up because it's such a hotly contested card that I usually don't end up getting it. Someone else will get it. And I've had these situations where like both Lady Jessica and Kwisatz are in the opening row, and I've picked Jessica first, so
we'll get there, folks.
We'll get there. But yeah, I mean, there's just it opens up endless creative plays, I feel, and just makes the game a little bit more like you feel like you can go everywhere. I mean, that's the theme of the card, the Kwisatz Haderach, the one who can see all sides of the genetic pool and all that stuff. But it just feels like really cool to play. Yeah.
I think it is worth noting, like, the things you can do. I think a lot of people in the current, like, meta that we're exposed to will get this card to double into the ship.
Yeah.
I think that ultimately is just the situation, because interstellar shipping is rated exceptionally highly, and it's. I think I don't know if I'd want to put a percentage on it, but like I think like a predominant amount of the use of Quiz at Hadrach is to do double shipping. That's just the situation. That's just where we're at here. That's not to say he can't do other things, and do really cool stuff. He can be used to like, I've occasionally used him to like go double tech negotiation because I had a ton of spice. And there was just like great text, holo projectors, which is great. You want to cycle through your deck to get this guy sooner. You've got disposal facility. Great, get your deck thinner so you can draw this card. It's all about how many times can you draw this card. That is what Quiz is about. If you're only gonna draw him maybe twice, it's debatable whether you should get him.
Well, I think it's still worth it.
It's still very strong. It's probably for 2 is probably still worth getting hold of, but like you want it to be more. You want it to be 3 or 4 times. That is bonus agent actions that you get free of charge. You get a card to replace Kwisatz as well. You can go anywhere you want. You have no restrictions outside of board cost or influence restrictions. Obviously, the freedom that allows you to plan your turns out and what you want to do is just completely absurd.
The one thing that I've seen players do, I haven't managed to pull it off or prioritize it myself, but with a relatively early Kwisatz draw, I've seen sometimes a double selective breeding in order to thin that deck even further and also pull for a Spice Must Flow or whatever. So I like that move.
That's cool, yeah.
In order, if you got the forced place, if things line up for you, if you have the other access, in order to thin it up, because I fundamentally agree with what was said. Like when you have these super powered cards, then you want to see them as many times as possible. So look out for that double selective breeding as a way to thin your deck.
Now, it should be noted, this card does admittedly have the worst reveal effect in the game.
Of nothing.
That is absolutely nothing, yes. So, you don't want to be the person who makes that late Arakeen draw and pulls out Kwisatz Haderach. It's a bad feeling.
Don't you get to play it? Don't you get to play it then, though, on your next turn?
Yeah, you can play it.
Yeah, of course you can.
I guess if you draw a card, something to do with your...
I know there was a situation once where I drew this card somehow and I had to have a reveal. I'm sure there was a reason. I can't remember what it was now.
So if you go to your reveal turn, you do your reveal turn and you draw something during your reveal
Spaceport.
turn.
It was a Spaceport buy once.
Yeah,
I remember this now. I
yeah.
bought Spaceport with like Freighter Fleet and I drew Kwisatz Haderach. I was so cross.
Yeah, that will happen.
It.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, this is like complete, like absurd situations that may never happen in your games, but when it does,
you're crushed.
Just don't do that.
To feel your Kwisatz Haderach revealed, it's not a good place to be. But
has anybody seen a double highliner with the Kwisatz?
I've not seen it. No.
I've attempted it once. But I had to go like highliner and then hit Great Flat and highliner again. Someone got there first. I was like,
I got it.
I needed the bonus spice, and they beat me to it. The idea was highliner, get the water, mine Great Flat for the bonus spice, and then go back to highliner. But yeah, someone beat me to it, and I was like, damn, that would have been so cool.
One of my favorite plays with Kwisatz is definitely get on the highliner early, get in on the combat, intimidate your competition, not necessarily lock it up, but get way ahead, and then use the Kwisatz later for research station.
Yeah,
win like a 2 victory point combat, and use the water you got from highliner to infiltrate to research station and get a Spice Must Flow as well. Something like that. I love that.
Yeah. There's so many options. I think that's one of the nice things about this card that's really cool, is that, as you sort of said earlier, it's a good story maker, Kwisatz, because there's all these absurd things that you end up doing that you would never be able to do otherwise. And there's always good entertainment. So it burns extra points for that.
Now,
but
yes,
go on.
I was going to say the but too. Can I do the but first?
You do the buff.
Okay, but sometimes when you see it coming, so when you see Kwisatz Haderach coming, you can block people on the things they need in order to do the things they need with the Kwisatz. So sometimes that's one of the strengths of paying attention and what other people are doing in this game. And a lot of these high level cards, these high pick cards, do reward that kind of play, especially this one. If you see somebody, for instance, sitting on 1 or 2 spice, or maybe even just 1 spice, and you know, well, they're going to need to harvest some spice this turn, you can go block the easy, like in that there's no water, right? And then all they needed to do was go over to Imperial Basin and get the 1 spice to go to the selective breeding, which would enable all their stuff, and yada yada yada. Kind of paying attention to that game state can actually hurt the Kwisatz player, because you're actually trying to, it's not unheard of that a Kwisatz player will have excess water, but sometimes, because they'll go to the Highliner or whatever, but sometimes they'll get in situations where they'll do that situation where you go to Highliner and then you immediately go to Research Station, and if the game doesn't end and they're stuck on no water, there are situations where you'll be able to block them. And they won't be able to do anything about it. I mean, they can Kwisatz there, but then maybe you'll beat them to the space they need to go, or someone else will.
Negotiation is another good shout of a place to go. Turning that sword into a 1 persuasion is a very common tactic to try and get out of Kwisatz.
Yeah.
Because you're never really ever gonna just straight draw 8 persuasion in your deck. You're gonna get some 4s and 5s. You're gonna get the occasional 6. You might even get the rare 7 and a dagger you can turn up. It will occasionally happen, but you're going to have to put work into getting hold of this card, which means there's always room for someone to try and get in there first and just try and get in the way. So that is the only issue that Kwisatz has now. When he's there early, people are going to gun for him because they know the strength that he possesses. This is a pool player. This card is just absurd. You can do all sorts of crazy things because you know what you're going to draw into, and you can even tailor what you're going to do depending on that.
Yeah.
There's also the other memory Kwisatz combo, because of course Kwisatz is a Benny.
Yep.
Yes, this is something I did want to mention as well. You can use other memory to get this out of your discard pile, which is always nice when you can do it. Although it is, you can't control necessarily when that's going to happen, because of course you need your deck to kind of work with you, in that you need to get Kwisatz first, and you need other memory to happen afterwards. You also do need ultimately a deck that's big enough for you to actually reliably do that. If you only got like 7 or 8 or 9 cards, you're never going to have a discard pile. So that is something that is worth noting. Now, you might just say it doesn't matter, you just draw the cards, you pick up Kwisatz anyways, which is probably true, but it's worth pointing out.
True, yeah.
Definitely. I know we should probably wrap up on Kwisatz here, but I think it's important to remain flexible. Sometimes it makes the most sense to play Kwisatz as your second action.
And early, yes.
In order to get the Mentat, block somebody else, draw 2 cards, that's often a second action Kwisatz play potential for the Mentat.
Yeah, there's tons to do. But even with all of the greatness that we've said about this card, didn't get number 1. It didn't make it.
And let's talk about why that is when we talk about Jessica.
Yeah, Lady Jessica, our queen, our sovereign savior, number 1 card in the game. Both me and CJ decided to put it up there, and Patience still managed to find second place behind Choam.
Yeah. So all of us agree that Jessica's a better card than Kwisatz, which is pretty, you said, pretty fascinating.
Every single one of us put it above Kwisatz, which I did not expect when I saw these. I thought I was gonna get stick for putting Jessica ahead of Kwisatz, and then all of you did. I was like, what?
No, I've thought that Lady Jessica was one of the best cards in the game for a long time, and that since Ix has come out, I think that it's gone up in value for me. It was one of the best the cards in the game for the base game, of course. That Choam and Kwisatz were kind of up there. Liet, of course, Firm Grip. Those are all my top 5. But the fact that Lady Jessica is always good at every part of the game to buy, and it's always good when you draw it, is my argument. Basically, in a nutshell, you buy it, you get an influence. That's awesome. If you draw it, you're gonna use it to draw cards, which will give you more options and let you buy Spice Must Flows. It effectively equals about 2 Spice Must Flows just off the back of Jessica drawing 2 cards most of the time, provided you're not completely botching your deck or something like that. You're getting rid of your daggers and so on. She also has pretty decent access. Bene Gesserit, and she has Landsrad spaces. She has
Council, mining.
mining. Also city access. I mean, if you can use her to go to research station, drawing 5 cards, that's like a whole new hand. I mean, if you ever get Lady Jessica and Leah Kynes, I don't see how you can lose the game. Like,
going back to the story, I spoke earlier of Leah Kynes. I'm pretty sure, it was the very first game I ever played. I got both Leah Kynes and Lady Jessica, and I finished with 15 points.
Yeah, it's
crazy.
It was
just like absurd. It was just like I know I got it. I got in the last turn. There was double spice. I won like the Imperial Basin combat. I stole an alliance. I got another point from like Choam shares or something like that. It was just like the most ridiculous thing you ever saw. Yeah. And I was just like, this isn't a hard game. This is pretty easy. Here I am, 18 months later. But she's just like that. That's the strength. She's just anything you want to do with her. Even if you draw her by accident, she's still really good.
She reveals for 3.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. It's really interesting about her. Like, she's got these 3, these 3 superpowers, right? With 4 if you want to count. Yeah, 3. So when you buy her, you get a bump. Yeah. It's a bump of your choice. It's the equivalent of one of Memnon's passive power.
It's a weather power reveal, and that's like the 4th best card in the game.
Yeah. So you've got that's your first superpower, which is really important and flexible. Then you've got the 3 persuasion, which is huge, and I think a sword too, right? She has a sword as well.
Yeah, as a sword, just as an extra. Yeah. As if she needed a sword in combat, but she also offers that.
So she's got this great reveal, and then obviously the 2-card draw with plenty of access. She doesn't have all the access to the tracks, but she has all the colors and the bennies. So yeah, like you said, the super play with her is to go to selective reading and draw a whole new hand, draw 5 more cards. Yeah. Or sorry, 4 more cards. But I think the thing with her is really none of those 3 things are as super powered as the Quizette's one trick, but they're all significantly the equivalent of one of the leader's abilities, right?
She's always good. That's what I mean. She's always good in every form. Her agent ability is phenomenal. Her reveal is phenomenal. Her buy is phenomenal. Like, all of those things are good, and they're never bad. But as opposed to like Quizette's buying it late is one of the reasons it's never not ranked as high for me. Like, I will never buy Quizette's like round 6, round 7. That's just not going to happen. Yeah. It's not going to come back around.
Unless it's like a game where it's like it come to conflict and like no one's got like more like 5 points. And you can see there's a few rounds to go, but that's pretty rare.
Or if I'm playing something with like the spaceport or something like that, I like that card or that tile, but we'll talk about that later. But Lady Jessica, no matter what time you buy her, she is good, and she will always be your friend. She's always there for you. She will be your bodyguard.
Yeah. Duke Leto chose correctly.
Yeah, exactly.
He made a good decision.
And an extra, like, don't get me wrong, the Kwisatz is obviously our 2nd or 3rd ranked card for each of us, I think. So, but so there's a lot of flexibility there, and there's infiltration, and there's drawing a card. Those are all powerful things that the Kwisatz does. I guess just Jessica, in a game where you ultimately need to be adaptive and flexible, she offers so much flexibility and so many options that that's what puts her over the top. Also, we haven't even said she's 1 cheaper than the Kwisatz.
She's
and
1
that
cheaper.
May not sound like a lot, but costing 7 instead of 8 is that much more accessible in the early game.
It's actually a massive deal, especially if you're Helena. Buying for 6 is pretty easy you can line that up. But if you get your ring early, you can almost guarantee to get Jessica round 1 if you're like, moderately lucky. There's a lot of things that could go right round 1 and 2 to get Jessica. She rarely stays on the board for very long. I'd say Kwisatz and Choam stay there just a little bit longer because they're, sometimes you do want to, as BlackShadow said, sometimes you do really need that point more. I think that there are times when I'd buy a point over Jessica, and that might be like when I already have the friendship with the Emperor, or all of my friendships or all my alliances are basically locked, and I wasn't going to impact that, but I could still buy a point. But at that point, like, it doesn't matter. I could buy her anyway as a denial. Someone else might try to get it. But I mean, that's one of the reasons this card is just so good. It's always good. It's hard to hard to go wrong.
You could give forever. It's one of the few cards in the game that is like, if a Halleck just yeets into space, it's just like, how could you do that, you monster?
Yes,
I've seen it. I just when people had load of high persuasion. And I remember Helena was like in a battle. I remember this now. Yeah, she was in like a combat. It was like a kind of late-ish, like turn 5, turn 6, something. And she legitimately revealed early with a ton of swords. But she made sure to signet ring with like her only persuasion card to just like some random Imperial basin, just to yeet Jessica out of everyone else's hands and just yeet her into the moon. It was astonishing. I was just like, that's pretty ballsy, but that's what she does. Like, that's the power that she innately has. It's insane. Like, you could argue, obviously, that, let's say, Kwisatz, the ability to send agents anywhere you want, even if they're occupied, can well generate you points. Lady Jessica will generate you points. Unless you completely mishandle her, she is going to generate you like at least 2 points a game. Like, probably more than that.
Possibly more.
So I want to point out a couple things. Like, obviously, none of these cards immediately win you the game, right? No. We've already talked about playing well with them, and there's good strategies for them. But I've played the game. I played where I bought Jessica early and lost, and there are lots of situations where just because you have one of the best cards in the game doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win the game. Sometimes plot cards conspire against you, and you never get any intrigues that are worth points, or you luck draw into the wrong cards, and you're just like, what are my odds of this happening? That can happen. Variance happens. But one of the reasons I think Jessica is, for me, number one, is she helps find herself. Well, once you've drawn back through your deck, you're going to find her more frequently. This is the same kind of thing that happens with Kwisatz. But with Jessica, she draws that extra card. That's just one extra card. You don't have to go through in your deck. She helps get back to your deck as fast as possible, or in your hand, as fast as possible, and that's very, very strong. So
there's probably something to be said for the fact that when you have her relatively early, because of her Benny access, but that's the only faction track access is, there's probably something to be said for the fact that she pushes you towards selective breeding.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas
there's an innate connection.
Yeah, whereas the Kwisatz gives you ultimate options of it being able to infiltrate anywhere. You could just do the most creative thing, try to win that combat, whatever it is that you're using the Kwisatz for. Because Jessica nudges you in the early mid-game towards selective breeding, maybe that's one of her special advantages, that then you're thinning your deck as well. That's an interesting thought.
I mean, probably it's like you don't really notice at all because you're just drawing so many cards. You forget about the fact that it's also potentially thinning your deck out a bit as well, and you just don't realize it because of the amount of drawing power that you've already obtained. It's just like a cog in the wheels, just that the one extra component in the mixture that just kind of like, you don't even see it. But when you look at it and objectively, you're like, oh yeah, it also does, amongst all the other things it already does, it also ends up doing that. Yeah. Just like almost by so yeah. There's a good job, Paul Denham, with Lady Jessica. We're very happy with the card. More of these, please, would be great, so we can start finishing our games in like 4 rounds.
Yeah, I wonder. It'll be really interesting to see if they come in with a card expansion. Like, I can't really. I mean, my imagination obviously isn't the equivalent of these designers, but I can't imagine adding like a whole new segment of the game or something like that. Or really messing with any of the areas very much. It would really be challenging to do that and improve the game at this point, I think. Mm-hmm. I might be mistaken, but it seems like the thing they will do is add some cards, and it'll be really fascinating to see how they change the overall ranking and the whole mix.
It seems hard to see how any card could top Lady Jessica, though. Like, it really seems. What would a card have to do other than just like use as agent action, get a victory point. Like outside of that, what would a card have to do to beat Jessica?
I'd say there's not enough tech related cards. Like
I agree with that.
there's yeah, I think if I was to choose a couple of themes, definitely one of them would be tech. Because I think what we're all realizing with more experience with the expansion is just how powerful and synergistic the tech deck is. So
Yeah,
something that allows more access to tech, but in a creative and different way.
I'd like to see something that rewards you for having tech. Like if you have 2 tech, it gives you a bonus and it's agent action or something like that. You know, or swords if you have tech, or things like that that reward that kind of play. Because I like that idea a lot. I think that we haven't really explored tech fully with the Ix expansion. I feel there's only so much you can really buy in the game to see all the tech, and sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Like there's no incentive to do it, or the tech that comes out is just too expensive, and we only go through a couple a game. Lots of things. I mean, that's one of the variabilities and really cool things about this game is that there's so many different ways it plays out, and you have to kind of evaluate the board. But I would like to, yeah, I agree with that. I'd like to see more kind of card synergies based around tech. I'd like to see more card synergies based around dreadnoughts.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. That's a
Yeah.
really good point.
I mean, the things like
Because the dreadnoughts are being underused, and I'm not sure they anticipated that, and maybe that's just in this minority online community that plays so much. I think dreadnoughts are still like a shiny new toy for a lot of newer players, and there's unless you're playing a lot online, you don't get to play like dozens and dozens of reps like we do.
yeah, I mean, full scale assault is fun, but a kind of like half scale assault would be cool. I don't know, something like that. Some way, some sort of like effect that rewards you for having the dreadnoughts in combat, but isn't an 8 cost card. Was it 8? Or is it 7? No, it's
an 8.
It's 8. Oh my god. Yeah, I mean,
why did you rated it so low?
why?
That card,
So
because it's way overpriced.
it's way overpriced. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of different ways. Probably just more cards, I think, would be great. We have a lot of characters who haven't been revealed in this universe yet. They're coming for the second film. So I'm sure that they're going to time it for that.
I'm calling it now. Talaxu Jessica.
Talaxu Jessica.
That's my guess for the new #1 card.
I agree, though, that some new leaders would be another thing they would add in an expansion, and the new leaders might unlock other potentials. That's for sure. But I think you're right about the dreadnoughts. That's another theme that should be developed with the cards a bit more. Like even just 2 or 3 dreadnought related cards could really open things up.
Agreed. Yeah, I agree.
And what about the Emperor track? Like the Emperor track seems to need a little love as well. Maybe a card or two that somehow potentiates the Emperor track a bit more.
I mean, I don't know what you're talking about. Conspire's great. Like, I don't know what you're
It's not a card. No. I mean,
I don't care.
It's like with 2 with 2 influence and the Emperor track get a bonus. Something other than Firm Grip is the only thing that rewards Emperor track, right? So
yeah,
something else would be cool.
Some kind of Emperor bond makes sense. It doesn't exist, of course. I mean, there's loads of cards at the Emperor or Spacing Guild, and it's just there for decorations. So I can only assume that there are plans to install something like that. But we shall see in the future.
Yep.
Yeah, like lean into the theme with the Emperor, right? Like just some more troops and some more intrigue cards as your agent reveal with your Emperor.
Please give us a Christopher Walken leader. Please. Please. He's been cast as the Emperor in the next film. Please make him.
Oh, no way. I didn't know that.
Yeah, please do.
I mean, that would be a pretty badass leader to play.
Oh, yes.
Play as the Emperor. I mean, that'd be a lot of fun.
I'm calling it now. It's going to happen. Well, that's going to do it for us, I think. Do we have anything final to say?
What a great pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks to everybody who listened all the way through all these.
Yeah, little look under the hood. This has taken us 3 separate sessions to record and a lot of time. But I think this is, and that's not even counting the amount of time that CJ is about to edit this. He can write in the video description how long this actually took to edit altogether. I'm sure he'll find a way to do that.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
We should say that we've recorded in the months of May and June and expect the editing to be done in August or September.
Minimum.
We're just gonna skip July.
No chance. No chance.
Well,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thanks
Thank you
so
all
much
for watching. Thank you guys for talking with
Yeah.
us. I mean, it's been a pleasure to go through all these cards. It's been a lot of fun.
And your comments as they come streaming in, of course, will be there.
Let us know what you think your top cards are, or your worst cards, or whatever. Are we wrong? Are we right? Do you care? Let us know. We want to know your thoughts. And
Don't
we'll
hate me for Choam Directorship.
Don't hate BlackShadow for Choam.
I already do. All right, guys. Take care.
All right, see y'all.